Hi, I'm Caden, here with my brother,
Cal,
and you're watching Eating W's.
eat the W.
That's a W. Let's eat one. Let's eat one. That's a W.
On today's episode of Eating W's, we have my mock draft 2.0. And man, is it a doozy. I'm going to give you a little bit of a warning right now. As we mentioned last week, these last two mock drafts and Cal and I will have trades in them, so we can predict some trades. And let me tell you, Callan kind of touched on it last week, but I agree with him. We are almost a month out now, I think over a month out now actually, from the last first round trade, which was the Bears moving back and the Panthers moving up for the first overall pick. So though it was a pretty huge trade, we're a month away from that trade, and there's been nothing happening in the first round since that. So I think this is the calm before the storm, and either in the next coming weeks, or if not, definitely on draft night, trades are going to be absolutely wild. So I tried to reflect that in my mock draft. You'll see what I mean in a little bit. But before we get to that insanity, we'll start off with a quick bits of news, starting off with a re-sign. Jeffrey Simmons signs a 4-year, $94 million extension with the Tennessee Titans. So something in my mock draft that I kind of touched on last time that I thought would happen is them drafting D-line and losing Jeffrey Simmons. Now that doesn't happen, so my new mock draft will reflect that. A huge signing, Odell Beckham Jr. signs a 1-year deal worth up to $18 million with the Ravens. So as you can tell, he's one of those guys, he was holding out to get paid, but at the end of the day, he got paid because that includes almost a $14 million signing bonus. So most of that money is literally guaranteed once he signs that contract. So big time there for Odell and the Ravens.
If it helps them to bring back Lamar Jackson, then I think it's worth it. But
definitely,
if not, then I'm surprised that he signed there without a quarterback.
Lamar already put a video on one of his social medias of a FaceTime with him and Odell Beckham. So it really makes me think Lamar is going to be staying a Raven for now, especially with this signing, like Callan mentioned. And then finally, a trade that actually just happened today, Tuesday the 11th. The Lions are sending former second overall pick Jeff Okudah to the Atlanta Falcons in return for only a 5th round pick this year. So I think the Lions could have gotten more out of him. Jeff Okudah is by no means a star and definitely didn't live up to that 3rd overall pick. I said second, but he was a 3rd overall pick. He definitely didn't live up to that, but he's still relatively young and good rotational player, and he's really going to help Atlanta out, just bring some depth to that secondary, which is something they need because they have a huge drop off after AJ Terrell. So really good signing or trade, I should say, by the Falcons.
Yeah, it's a nice pickup for the Falcons. Like you said, it adds depth to their defensive backfield. And when Cam Sutton was signed with the Lions, you knew that Jeff Okudah became expendable then.
Yep, definitely. So now we are going to jump in to that crazy mock draft, Caden 2.0. To start off, I think that we should probably give a little more hype to the 1st and 2nd overall pick here, but I'm not going to, just because they're the few things that did not change from my 1.0 to my 2.0. Just a quick hint, my first two overall picks are both the same from last time, so we'll fly through those quick. Starting with the Panthers, I have them taking Ohio State quarterback C.J. Stroud. Frank Wright likes the size. If you look at all of his other quarterbacks, they're all 6'3" or taller, all the way up to, I think, Nick Foles is 6'5", and they're all around that 230-pound range. And when Bryce Young is sitting there at, I want to say, 5'11", and then just under 200, and you got C.J. Stroud there at 6'3" and just over 200, I just think that he's going to go with the athletic. Stroud is a little more accurate than Bryce Young. I just have the Panthers taking him. And then we're just going to jump straight on to the Texans real quick with Bryce Young. Again, I have them taking Bryce Young. He's one of the most NFL-ready quarterbacks in the draft. And the Texans are slowly but surely building a really good team there that just needs a good young quarterback. And I think Bryce Young's going to fill that spot well.
Yeah, I agree with that. He definitely, I don't like his size. I think that he's going to fall in this draft. I think he'll be the one that falls, but he still is definitely the most NFL ready. And if he was only a couple inches taller, I think that he'd be looked at as the top overall pick, no doubt.
Certainly. So now we are going to start with the insanity at the 3rd overall pick here. The 3rd overall pick, which is usually owned by the Arizona Cardinals, is where we find my first of many trades in my mock draft 2.0. I have none other than the Las Vegas Raiders jumping up over the Indianapolis Colts and taking Florida quarterback Anthony Richardson. They just watched the first two, and in my opinion, top 2 quarterbacks come off the board. And they panic a little bit because they want quarterback, and they know that they're all the way down there at 7. They don't know who else is going to trade up. They don't know who the Colts are going to take. They don't want to get left with just anybody. So they go up, they get their guy that they want. Far from an NFL-ready quarterback, but they have a pretty damn good offense around him and one of the better receivers in the league in Devontae Adams to teach him and kind of show him the ropes of the NFL. So they take the athletic upside and leapfrog the Colts for Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, and I think Richardson also had the fastest 40 time of all the quarterbacks. So that matches what the Raiders look for in a draft prospect. So
I did not even connect that. I didn't think about that at all. But the meme continues. Don't let the 40 beam for the Raiders die. I love it.
In some way, somehow, it's always connected some way.
The 40 is going to make its way in there somehow. Because you know that with Shane Steichen being the new head coach of the Colts, he's going to want a mobile quarterback after loving what he was able to do with Jalen Hurts there in Philadelphia. So if you want Anthony Richardson, you better get ahead of the Colts. Speaking of the Colts, we're going to move on to number 4 now. But not speaking of the Colts, we're actually going to be speaking of the Bears, because after the Colts get leapfrogged and they know that they can no longer get Anthony Richardson, they actually move back. They build up some draft capital, and the Bears use some of that draft capital that they got in the Carolina trade to jump back up and leap over the Seattle Seahawks in order to take Georgia defensive lineman Jalen Carter. Now, this guy was looked at as the 1st overall pick when the Bears had him, and before he had all the legal trouble. But it kind of seems like that legal trouble is going to get filed away somehow, or just get resolved in some way, shape, or form, whether through a settlement or just him doing some community service or whatever. And Jalen Carter is an absolute beast of a man, and the Bears love that inside pass rush throughout the whole history of their organization. So why not get one of the best inside linemen in a while in the last couple of drafts in Jalen Carter at 4?
Yeah, this is by far one of the most highest ceiling prospects in the draft. And he lands with the Chicago Bears here, who trade up to get him. And like you said, he was likely to be their pick at number one overall. So they get their guy either way, no matter it's at 1 overall or 4.
Yep. And then the team that the Bears had to leapfrog to get Jalen Carter, the Seattle Seahawks, actually stay put at the 5th overall pick, and they take Alabama edge rusher Will Anderson Jr. They're sitting here at number 5, and they get a really damn good prospect and one of the higher floors in this entire draft, and Will Anderson Jr. just falling right into their lap, who they can match up with a young Boye Mafe on the other side, having a Chinua in there in that pass rush rotation. They become a really scary defensive line all of a sudden.
Yeah, this is the top edge rusher, pass rusher in the draft this year in my eyes, and he lands with the Seattle Seahawks, who bolster that defensive line and that 3-4 defense.
Yeah, that would be a hell of a pickup if he fell all the way to 5 for them. Moving on to number 6 with the Detroit Lions. I also have them hanging out in their spot and taking the next best edge rusher in Tyree Wilson from Texas Tech. They took a hit on Aiden Hutchinson last year, and it worked out super well for them. Hutchinson ended up being Defensive Rookie of the Year. So I think that they take another swing at it and try to build one of the youngest, if not best, pass rushing duos in the NFC right now by picking up Tyree Wilson and taking the upside on him.
Yeah, this will really add to their kneecap biting style at defense with a hardworking Tyree Wilson, who doesn't have the highest ceiling in this draft, but is one of the most talented.
Yep, certainly. So now moving on to number 7, which is now the Arizona Cardinals, since they traded with the Las Vegas Raiders earlier in my draft. And I have them taking a little bit of a shocker here, but I have them going with Texas running back Bijan Robinson. If you look at the Cardinals over the offseason, they lost Chase Edmonds. They lost another kind of rotational back. I don't remember who exactly. But now one of their only guys that they really have left in that running back room is James Conner, who James Conner's a really good back, but in my eyes, he's just not a 3-down guy. He's okay out of the backfield. He's really good on the goal line, just kind of being a bowling ball in there and getting you those touchdowns. But they need a more elusive 3-down back type guy, and that's what Bijan Robinson's going to be for them. He is one of the better running back prospects in the last few years. And running back isn't necessarily a sexy pick anymore like it used to be because they just seem to be such a dime a dozen anymore. It almost seems like every team has one, if not two, really good running backs. But the Cardinals get a really good guy here, and Bijan Robinson ends up going top 10.
Yeah, and this would be, one of those top running back duos then, or become one of those top running back duos with one of the most electrifying players in this draft. And he's kind of a wild card of this draft. And I feel like a team out there is going to fall in love with him because of his explosiveness capability just out of the backfield. And somebody's will trade up to get him.
Yep, certainly. Now jumping on to number 8, and we have yet another trade within the top 10. And this one is my personal favorite. I have none other than the Minnesota Vikings trading with the Atlanta Falcons and moving way back from 23 all the way to the 8th overall pick and selecting Illinois corner Devin Witherspoon. Now, Witherspoon is just a guy that perfectly fits that Brian Flores defense. They want a guy who's sticky in man coverage, who's willing to get up in a receiver's face, but also is going and willing to lay the boom in the run game. And that's the two things that Devin Witherspoon thrive in the NFL, or should thrive in the NFL, and is thriving in college. He's not the best zone guy, but a Brian Flores defense just doesn't play that much zone, so why not fit him with your scheme? And the Vikings showed last year in the draft, moving from 10 all the way to, I want to say 32, that they're willing to make huge jumps in the draft, whether back or up. And it kind of fits the mold with last year then picking Lewis Seen, the safety out of Georgia. Seen and Witherspoon are very similar players in the physical style that they play. So it just made a lot of sense to me. It's a big jump, don't get me wrong, but we have a little bit of draft capital to play with, and corner is a huge need for Minnesota. So I like this jump for them.
Boy, if this trade happens for the Vikings, this will be a big move for them. And this would be quite the pickup with Devin Witherspoon being one of the probably the top defensive back in this draft. Definitely the best system fit for the Vikings, as you were just saying, and he would bolster that defensive backfield right away.
I would love to see Devin Witherspoon and Brian Flores defense. I just think that sounds awesome. So now moving on to number 9 in the trade from earlier. This was Chicago Bears, but now it is Indianapolis Colts since the Bears moved up to number 4 earlier. And the Colts do still end up getting a quarterback. I have them taking Kentucky quarterback Will Levis. Now this probably isn't exactly what they wanted. I'm sure that in an ideal world, they get Anthony Richardson there at 4, but in my mock draft, it just doesn't happen. They get leapfrogged. So now they not necessarily settle, but just end up going with the next best thing that's left for them in Will Levis. He's still a really interesting prospect. Him and Richardson are both very much not NFL ready. So they're pretty even there. And then their floors are pretty even as well, in my opinion, just in very opposite ways. Anthony Richardson's ceiling as a running quarterback is just as high as Will Levis's floor as a kind of pocket passer, strong arm quarterback. So the Colts still get a really good project quarterback, but just not exactly the one they wanted.
No, but it is definitely a good one and one of the strongest arms in this draft. And he falls to the Colts here, who do get a quarterback to finally build the franchise around. And he would be nice for him to be able to sit a year and learn the game a little bit. But I think he'll be one of the first quarterbacks to play if he's drafted.
Yeah, it'll be a really fun competition between, in my case, Will Levis, but whoever the Colts end up drafting at some point in Gardner Minshew. It's going to be a fun quarterback competition there. So now rounding out the top 10, I have the Philadelphia Eagles staying put at that 10th overall slot and picking up Ohio State wide receiver Jackson Smith-Njigba. Now, the Philadelphia Eagles offense in the Super Bowl last year and just in a couple of different situations showed that when they do have to come back and kind of get in an offensive dogfight rather than getting an early lead and then just running the clock out, they kind of struggled and they showed a few holes in their armor there. So right here, they pick up a guy who's going to complement the wide receiver duo of A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith super duper well. I mean, A.J. Brown, you just got this physical beast, 50-50 guy. You got such a precise route runner in Devontae Smith. And then you got Smith Najibo, who's just going to be in the middle doing everything that they need for the rest of that offense. So I really like this pickup for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, this would be the perfect slot guy for the Eagles and that perfect number 3 guy for that wide receiver trio. And it would be the top wide receiver in this draft falling to the Eagles to help bolster that wide receiver room.
Yep, I don't think wide receiver is their biggest need by any means. I understand that, but I just think it's a really good luxury pick that they get to make since they already have such a stacked roster.
Add to the weapons, add to the firepower.
Exactly. Now moving on to number 11 in the Tennessee Titans, I also have them picking up a receiver of their own, but this time TCU's Quentin Johnson, and he is going to be almost an exact replacement for what they had with A.J. Brown. They had A.J. Brown the last few seasons, of course, and he played really well in that system as just being that big-bodied guy. Ryan Tannehill really liked using him as that kind of safety valve, big-body guy. So now they're going to get someone really similar play style in Quentin Johnson, who's hopefully can come in and be a number 1 wide receiver for them. If that actually happens is much more of a toss-up, but there is certainly a possibility of it.
Yeah, it's the big-bodied Quentin Johnson that would follow the Titans here, and it would be quite the pickup for them to help any depth for that wide receiver room at the very least. It was a very thin wide receiver room for that Tennessee Titans.
That is for sure, definitely. Moving on to the 12th overall pick, I have the Houston Texans again staying put and taking Iowa edge rusher Lucas Van Ness. Now they run a 3-4 defense. They went offense last time to help out their young offense, so why not go defense this time and help out their young defense? Van Ness is a guy that a lot of people have going top 10 or at the very least just before the Texans make their second pick. So he slips a little bit here and he falls to Houston at number 12. And it's not hugely great either way, but I think it's a really solid pickup for them.
Yeah, this would be quite the pickup for that Houston defense, who really has built quite the team down there in Houston. And this would be a versatile kind of player that can play the 3-4 defensive end or rush the passer from the edge.
Yep, definitely. And he can play anywhere on that defensive line, which is something that the Texans really need right now. It's just someone who can come in and do anything. So moving on, we got the New York Jets at the 13th overall pick, and I have them taking Northwestern tackle Peter Skoronski. This is just, how could you not take him at this point? You have very arguably the number 1 tackle in the draft fall to you at 13, just sitting there. You can move him over to that right tackle spot and pair him with the skyscraper of a man that they have at left tackle, Mekhi Becton. Or if you really want to get crazy, let him stay at Peter Skoronski's more natural left tackle position and see how Mekhi Becton does over at right tackle. You can really play with it at that point. Assumably, I still think that they get Rodgers at some point, so it just gives you extra protection for an aging quarterback in the backfield. I think this is an awesome pickup for the Jets.
So this pick says that the trade doesn't happen?
This pick says the trade does happen.
Oh, so they don't trade 13.
They don't trade 13.
They don't trade 13.
I've heard some reports that said they're trying to get it done without trading 13.
Oh, I know. They don't want to let go of 13.
So, yeah.
I get that. But I think that, boy, if they don't get 13, then I think it's a loss. Yeah. But I digress. This pickup, in general, this pickup, though, for the Jets would be quite the dynamic addition to their offensive line. Like you said, they could add him to either the left or the right tackle, and you get 2 cornerstone bookends for the long run in this scenario.
Yep. Now jumping to 14 with the New England Patriots, you want to talk about an absolute steal and a slider in the draft. I have the New England Patriots taking Oregon corner Christian Gonzalez all the way down here at the 14th overall pick. The Patriots' number 1 need is not corner right now. but they have a lot of guys that they rotate through that system already. So why not add another really versatile guy in there? Christian Gonzalez is a player who can be sticky in man coverage or drop back and be smart in zone coverage. He's just an all-around type corner. He's willing to help in the run game as well. I just think that he's somebody Bill Belichick could have a lot of fun with, and just an absolute steal to get him all the way down here at almost the middle of the first round. So.
Yeah, this is a dynamic, big-bodied cornerback who will do wonders for that defensive backfield in New England, especially with Belichick still coaching that defense for as long as he will.
Yep, so back-to-back steals right there for those two teams. Now moving on to the Green Bay Packers at 15th overall. I have them taking Utah tight end Dalton Kincaid. Here is the first tight end off of my board in this mock draft, in this stacked tight end draft. I have Kincaid going first this time relative to when I had him going second last time, just because he fits the Packers system better. They're going to have a young quarterback, again, assumably, I should say. They're going to have a young quarterback in Jordan Love. Their receiver core isn't the best thing in the world. So why not pick up a soft-handed tight end in the best receiving tight end in this year's draft class to be another weapon and an amazing safety valve for Jordan Love in his first year as a starter?
This would be the first offensive weapon the Packers will have taken since Jordan Love in the 2020 draft, but the first offensive skill player taken since the 2002 draft, if it falls this way. And this would still be quite the pickup, like you said, being the top receiving option. He's one of the top offensive prospects in this draft, let alone the top tight end. And I think that it would be quite the addition to the tight end room, not only the tight end room, but the receiving room, and help give Jordan Love a lot more weapons, whether that is Jordan Love or Aaron Rodgers. It would be nice to finally give Rodgers a first-round pick in his final season. But, as long as he can block, that's one of the scheme fits. That's kind of his, I don't know if it's his MO, but as long as he can run block and pass block, he'll fit right in that Packers room.
Oh man, my favorite part about this pick is that the Packers get an offensive weapon without having to take a first-round receiver. It's exactly what they want. It's their ideal situation. And Dalton Kincaid is not the best blocker. His MO is being that receiver, but he gets to learn from big dog Mercedes Lewis in his first year. So
possibly. Mercedes Lewis is still a free agent.
Is he? You gotta re-sign him.
But he was more of a LaFleur guy than a Rodgers guy. So
interesting.
He could re-sign.
I mean, who better to learn from about run blocking as a tight end than the big dog? But moving on to the 16th overall pick, I have the Washington Commanders making a smart pick in taking Florida offensive guard Osiris Torrance. Their offensive line, and especially that offensive guard position, has just kind of been up for grabs and so ever since they lost Brandon Sheriff to the Jags 2 years ago. So now they get a young prospect who should be really good in that true offensive guard position to fill in for the not so recently departed Brandon Sheriff.
Yeah, this is a very common pick that I've seen, having Washington go not only Osiris Torrance, but just offensive line in general. And I think that's what they do to help bolster that offensive line who's been weak in the past couple of years.
The middle of the first round is just such a good place to take one of the best guard prospects in the draft. It seems to happen every year. Moving on to the 17th overall pick and the Pittsburgh Steelers, I have them taking Ohio State tackle Paris Johnson Jr. This is another guy who kind of slid down just from no tackles going in my top 10. So the Steelers get an absolute steal in the draft and pick up Paris Johnson here all the way at 17 without having to move at all. He's just such an aggressive player. They can play him anywhere on that offensive line that they need. So it's just the versatility and the absolute mauler inside of Paris Johnson fits Pittsburgh so well.
Yeah, protect the package. That's what it's all about. Protect Kenny Pickett, and with any protection and the dynamic ability of the Steelers with their wide receivers, he could become an all-pro quarterback this year if he's able to stay protected. And this pickup would really help that.
Definitely. Jumping to 18 and the Detroit Lions, I have them just as I did last time. This is actually another one that I had in my last draft, I have them taking Kalahe Cansey out of Pittsburgh, the inside defensive lineman, at their 18th overall pick. It just fits Dan Campbell in Detroit in general so well. He's an amazing pass rusher from the inside of that defensive line. And if you can get him here at 18, it's just a smart pickup, to say the least.
Yep, this is another knee biter for that defense, and he's a hard-working defensive lineman who can rush the passer from the inside, and that's really what the Detroit Lions need to help round out that Detroit Lion defense.
Definitely. And then at 19 overall here, I have the Buccaneers actually staying put, which I thought about trading them, but I did end up just having them stay put and take Notre Dame tight end Michael Mayer. Now, a lot of people have them going quarterback. I had them going Bijan Robinson last time. But in this case scenario, in my mock draft 2.0, all of those guys are gone. Top four quarterbacks are gone. Bijan's gone. So they end up replacing Rob Gronkowski and the recently departed Cameron Brate with arguably the best tight end in the draft, Notre Dame's Michael Mayer. Just such a versatile guy. He can really do it all as a tight end. He's a good pass catcher, really good blocker, willing to get his feet dirty or his hands dirty. I just really like him as a prospect.
Yeah, and like you said, they really need to replace the depth in that tight end room down in Tampa Bay, and this adds another offensive weapon for Baker Mayfield in Tampa.
Yep. Now moving on to the 20th overall pick, I yet again have a trade. The trades are back. I know you thought they were over, but they're back now. And I actually have a team that wasn't even supposed to pick in the first round trading in. I have the Seattle Seahawks deciding they already got Will Anderson Jr. They're really good at drafting in late rounds with GM John Snyder. So they're just going to let the late rounds be late rounds. And the Los Angeles Rams jump up to that 20th overall pick and get Joey Porter Jr., corner out of Penn State. It's just such a perfect guy to replace Jalen Ramsey. Jalen Ramsey's that big physical man corner, and what is Joey Porter Jr. but a big physical man corner? The Rams, of course, don't have the most draft capital since they always love to trade their first round picks away and never seem to have a first round pick. But this year they actually do the opposite and jump in and get one using some of that capital that they acquired from the Jalen Ramsey trade and get one of my favorite corners and players in general in this year's draft.
Yeah, this would be a really good pickup for the Rams, who would jump into the first round after not having a first round pick since 2016. And either way, their pick at like 33 or 34 is the highest that they've picked since 2016. So either way, they have a very high pick this year, which is unusual for a Matthew Stafford-led offense, especially in LA. And this would be quite the pickup for them. For that defensive side to help bolster that defensive backfield, especially after losing Jalen Ramsey.
A high first-round pick is not unusual for a Matthew Stafford-led offense.
Well,
it's very unusual for a Sean
McVay-led team.
But Matthew Stafford knows a lot about getting early first-round picks.
I didn't think about the Detroit years.
In his career with Detroit, but I just thought it was funny you mentioned that. Jumping to number 21, and again, moving from LA to LA with the Los Angeles Chargers, I have them taking USC wide receiver Jordan Addison. They just need any receiver that's going to take the top off the defense. You can throw Jordan Addison in here. You can throw Nathaniel Dell in here. Throw Jalen Hyatt in here from Tennessee. He's another guy that I really like. But they just need a fast, deep threat receiver. They have all these big body guys, and it limits their offense so hardcore because they have no vertical threat. It allows safeties to come down, and it's just not good for the Chargers. So you give them a vertical threat here, and it absolutely changes the way their offensive dynamic is.
Yeah, it would really help round out that Chargers offense. And with the possible departure of Keenan Allen because of the Mike Williams extension, this would be a nice replacement for Keenan Allen, who's been their longtime receiver there. But this would be a dynamic pickup for them in the wide receiver room, for someone who could take the top off the defense.
Yeah, Justin Herbert has an absolute cannon, and we just never get to see it because we have all these big body guys. So I want to see him launch one to a speedster down the field. Moving on to 22 with the Baltimore Ravens. Now, I actually made this before the Odell Beckham signing, but I do still like this pick. I don't mind it. I have them taking Boston College wide receiver Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers, his main knock against him is his size. He is a smaller wide receiver, but that does not change how versatile and how overall good he is as a wide receiver. He is going to be a hell of a player for whatever team ends up taking a risk on him. And you look at that top 3 receiver now in Baltimore, and you have Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, and Odell Beckham Jr. That is a really well-rounded top 3 guys who can do a lot of different things in there. So I still do like this pick, even with the OBJ signing.
Yeah, get them more weapons, and I think that's what Lamar Jackson really wants. And this would be quite the pickup for them and help add to that enticement for Lamar Jackson to come back to Baltimore. And they also have Devin Duvernay. Can't forget about him. So this would be quite the addition to the wide receiver room, who already would also have Mark Andrews leading the tight end room. That would be quite the pickup and really help this Baltimore Ravens offense.
Yeah, and the Ravens offense especially, but just in general, were decimated by injury last year. So get a good rotational and a good backup guy in that receiver room as well.
That talent has always been thin in Baltimore in the wide receiver area, and now it's going to be one of the most talented.
How ironic. Things change quick. Moving on to the 23rd overall pick, which of course was Minnesota, but is now the Atlanta Falcons from that big trade earlier. I have the Falcons taking Georgia edge rusher Nolan Smith. The Falcons jump way back here all the way to 23 and still get one of the higher ceilings in the entire NFL draft with Nolan Smith. This is a guy who can play off the ball. He can rush the passer. He can even get his nose in there in the run game. He can just really do it all. An athletic freak for his size and position, to say the least. So a really good, well-rounded player that can do everything in Atlanta, because again, they're one of those teams that need everything right now.
This would be an immediate impact help for this Atlanta Falcons defense if they pick up Nolan Smith, who, even though is a raw prospect, was a workout warrior at the combine and really showed that he has the potential to be one of the top defensive players to come out of this draft.
Yeah, Atlanta has the low expectations that they can take the risk on hitting home runs instead of singles in this year's draft.
Definitely.
Moving on to the 24th overall pick and the Jacksonville Jaguars, I have them taking Maryland corner Devontae Banks. There's probably some other corners that they would want more in this draft that just fit them a little better, but that takes nothing away from Devontae Banks. He is still a hell of a corner. Huge frame, really tall, just athletic to boot. It's still a great pickup for Jacksonville, just probably not exactly what they wanted, but it's what they got with how the board fell.
Yeah, this is a kind of a best player available scenario, and I think that they get one of the best players available, definitely. This is another tall, athletic, physical corner, which is kind of the MO of this defensive backfield draft, and this definitely will add to the Jaguars' defensive backfield with an immediate impact.
Yep. Now moving on to 25 and the the New York Giants, rather. I have what is probably, ironically, the most unrealistic thing in my entire draft. But I have the New York Giants trading their pick to none other than the Philadelphia Eagles. Oh, big time rivalry trade. But I think that the kind of stigma around divisional trades is slowly wearing down.
It seems to be.
I mean, Minnesota and Detroit is, of course, top of mind. The ones who did it last year did their huge trade interdivisionally. The Eagles and the Giants are big-time rivals, so they might not go quite that far, but it would be crazy to see, and it's something that I think makes sense for the Eagles because it allows them to leapfrog the Cowboys and jump up to 25 and get Clemson defensive lineman Brian Bresee. I think that this is a guy who really fits Dallas's system and would definitely be Dallas's pick at 26, if not for the Eagles coming up and getting him. But he fits the Philadelphia system really well as well, because they lost Javon Hargrave on the inside. They have some rotation, but they have a lot of older guys such as Ndamukong Suh and Linval Joseph on the inside there. So get some young blood and just get you a hard worker on the inside defensive line, somewhere that they pick a lot in the first round.
And this would be another jump up for the Eagles to jump ahead into the Cowboys and steal their player, which they did with with Dallas Goedert and
they did.
2017 draft.
That sounds right. Yeah.
They jumped in front of Dallas to select Goddard, and they do it again here and jump up in front of them to select Brian Breesy, who would add to that defensive line rotation and help replace Javon Hargrave, as you had said.
Yeah. You're trading with a rival, but then you're screwing over a rival, so it's a lot of mixed feelings. But it's a toss-up. We'll see if it happens. Now moving on to the Cowboys at 26, and they do just stay put and go with another Clemson defensive lineman, this time it being Myles Murphy. DeMarcus Lawrence is slowly aging, and they don't really have a ton on that defensive line outside of DeMarcus Lawrence. So you get a guy like Myles Murphy, who's one of those guys who's more of a defensive end, but can play anywhere on the defensive line if you really need him to. He's got the big frame that you can push him inside, and he'll still be a disruptor and get you some pass rush. So it's still a really good pickup for the Cowboys, just not quite ideal like it would be for them with Brian Breesy.
Yeah, this is one of the top edge rushers available or left available instead of the top interior defensive lineman left available. And I know that the Cowboys need help with both, but they really needed that interior defensive lineman. But this helps out that edge rushing where Micah Parsons, who kind of takes over the edge rushing and led the Cowboys in sacks last year, even though he's supposed to be an off-the-ball linebacker.
Yeah. Mozzie Smith from Michigan, the defensive tackle, is another guy I could definitely see going here. But for now, I have Myles Murphy. Moving on to number 27 with the Buffalo Bills, I have them taking Alabama safety corner Brian Branch. That Bills secondary doesn't necessarily need a safety, but they just need depth in general, because like I was kind of talking about with the Ravens earlier, their secondary got beat to all hell last year. And I don't think it's going to be near as bad as it was last year. But when you have guys coming off injuries like that, you see a lot of them get re-injured. So not only do you get very arguably the best player left on the board overall, regardless of position, in Brian Branch, you get somebody who can fill in on any role in that secondary for you if those injury bugs do bite you again.
Yeah, this is someone who can play the slot corner and the kind of center field safety and in the box as well. So like you said, he was one of the top prospects left available, and he will be making an immediate impact on this Buffalo Bills defense if it falls this way.
Yep, and then moving on to 28, I have the Cincinnati Bengals taking Southern Carolina corner Cam Smith. This is a guy who was not in my first round last time, but he does jump up this time just because there was a much larger influx of corners in my first round in 2.0 compared to 1.0. But Cam Smith's a guy that I really like, and somebody that if the Vikings stay at 23, I wouldn't mind taking him. I really wouldn't. He's just one of those tall, lanky corners who are going to have that huge reach that really messes with wide receiver. Good in man coverage. He's willing to play the run. Not sure how he is in zone coverage, but I'm sure he's at least decent. So it's a good pickup here for Cincinnati, and they replace that secondary because in the AFC, you need secondary. There's good corners and good wide receiver cores everywhere, so you got to have some corners to stop those offenses.
Definitely, you got to try, and this will be a player that help try to keep that AFC offenses at bay. And this is, shown to be one of the deepest defensive back drafts in a long time, and it shows it with the many defensive back selections. And I think that this is another one of those tall, athletic corners who can make an immediate impact on any team.
Yep. And then moving on to 29 with the New Orleans Saints, I have them taking Tennessee tackle Darnell Wright. Now, I really struggle to pick the Saints. There's a couple of different positions that they really need. There's a few spaces that they could go that they don't even have a huge need. But you just brought in Derek Carr and paid him a lot of money, so you're going to want to protect him. Here I have them taking Darnell Wright because tackles are just more of a premier position, especially in the first round of the NFL draft. Osiris Torrance, the top guard, is already gone. So I just wanted to pick a guy who could play pretty much anywhere on that offensive line. Darnell Wright's a guy that I think you could move inside and he would still do really well. I think he could play either tackle position really well. So just a kind of plug-and-play guy for the Saints here.
Yeah, multi-tool offensive lineman always fits somewhere in the NFL. And this is one of those guys. And he will be a nice pickup for the Saints. They're still looking to replace Teron Armstead and the impact that he was able to make.
Yep. Now moving on to 30, who was the Eagles, but is now the New York Giants. I have them taking aforementioned Tennessee wide receiver Jalen Hyatt here. He's just like Jordan Addison, and to be honest, I personally like him more than Addison, but it seems like a lot of other people, analyst-wise, like Addison more. But I think Jalen Hyatt's going to be a really good wide receiver in the NFL. He's going to complement Isaiah Hodgins really well, with Hodgins being a bigger body, and then Jalen Hyatt can take the top off the defense and be that speedster. And again, you just paid Daniel Jones a lot of money. So give him some weapons. He already has some pretty good protections. Give him someone to throw to.
Yeah, as the Giants continue to attempt to rebuild that wide receiver room after the failings with Kenny Golladay and the guy they traded to the Kansas City Chiefs, Kadarius Toney. So they continue to rebuild that area with a nice pickup here with Jalen Hyatt, who was kind of fill that Kadarius Toney role that they wanted him to perform, and he will be able to take the top off the defense, like you said, and be a big play threat for this New York Giants offense.
And then for the 31st and final pick, I have the Kansas City Chiefs taking none other than Georgia tackle Broderick Jones. Now, if you look at the Chiefs roster, there's a lot of different places that they could go because, as we kind of talked about in Callens, the Chiefs just always have a luxury pick because they're always really good. They're always picking at the end of the first round. So here they go, in my opinion, best player available left on the board. They get a really good Boley-esque tackle in Broderick Jones here. Right now they have Jawan Taylor at left tackle and Lucas Niang at right tackle, so they're kind of set, but both of those guys in my eyes are a little bit of question marks, and they showed not last year, but in 2022 Super Bowl against I can't remember what year it was, maybe 2021 Super Bowl against the Tampa Bay Bucks, that as soon as the Chiefs do have a couple of really bad injuries on their offensive line and can't protect Mahomes, that whole team falls apart. So they make sure that they don't make the same mistake again. They get some depth at their offensive line and pick up a really good prospect in Broderick Jones.
Yeah, protect the package, like I said earlier, and that is a big pickup for the Kansas City Chiefs, who, even though if he may not start, definitely adds depth to that offensive line and will help to protect Mahomes for a long run.
Yeah, and I think that Broderick Jones is a guy who could really give a tough battle to Lucas Niang on the right side or Jawan Taylor on the left side. He can play both really well. So
definitely.
It would be fun to watch that mini camp battle there. So that is my mock draft 2.0. Crazy trades, I know, but when you don't have any trades leading up to the draft, you have to imagine draft night is going to go absolutely wild. So I wanted to reflect that in mind. I wanted to have some fun with it. Will all those trades happen? Hell no. There's no way I correctly predicted all those trades. But nevertheless, I know
if you even hit one,
it's going to be a miracle, yeah. But I know a lot of trades are going to happen. They just have to happen. There's no way we just There's no way we have just a completely non-traded first round of the draft. It almost never happens.
There'll be a run on a position where someone panics. There'll be a player that someone falls in love with who thinks that they have to go get. You know, these are just things that happen in the NFL draft, and it's fun when they happen.
I am excited for this year's draft because there is so many random variables that can be thrown in. It's a fun one. So thank you all so much for watching my mock draft 2.0. Tune in next week for Callen's mock draft 2.0. And then the Thursday after that will be none other than the real draft. So make sure you watch that starting April 27th. But until then, don't forget
to eat the W.